Okay, back for another quick talk. This is the dashboard removed from my Jeep TJ, and I just wanted to talk about what you need to remove versus what you don't have to remove, because personally I removed an awful lot that I didn't have to, and so I'm going to try and save you a little bit of time by telling you what you need to remove when you're working on the dashboard disassembly. So, from right to left, do you need to remove the speaker cover? No, you don't. Do you need to remove the glove box? Yes, you do. And the reason is that there's a wire harness connector. I believe it's for the airbag, but it's going to be up under here, and you need to remove the glove box in order to access it. So yes, remove the glove box. Over here, do you need to remove the cigarette lighter or this accessory? Depending upon how your Jeep is configured, it might be one thing or another. The answer is no. The cigarette lighter connector is part of the wire harness that stays on the dashboard, so there's no need to take any of this off. Do you need to undo anything associated with the airbag? The answer is no, you don't. Do you need to remove the controller for the air handler or airbox? Yes, you do, because the wire, not the wire harness, I guess, but the vacuum tube harness that plugs into the back of the air handler controller connects past into the airbox. So for that one, although you might be able to find this connector if you reach up under there, I'm not sure if you can. That might be an alternate solution to taking this off, but this is what you need to unplug. You really need to do that though, because I guess you don't need to do that when everything is unbolted from the dashboard itself. You can lean the dashboard towards the rear of the car and reach behind the dashboard to disconnect this connector. So I guess the answer is actually no, you don't need to remove that air handler control. Do you need to remove the stereo? My answer is it depends. In my case, I had an aftermarket stereo, and I had to remove it in order to gain access to the antenna connector. The stereo harness it stays on the dashboard, and as you can see here, my stereo harness was butchered. I have an aftermarket stereo that a previous owner had installed. I intend to fix that, but again, the answer, bottom line is, with the exception of removing the antenna connector, you shouldn't have to remove the stereo, and you might be able to reach up behind the why can't I spit it out? The glove box to pull out that connector. And also, while I'm on the subject of the connector, do I have let me grab this light. Let's go over here to the car. Here is the antenna. There is a connector, an intermediary connector, I guess, and your vehicle might differ because, again, this is an aftermarket installation, so I don't know what exactly. The lighting is crap here, sorry. Maybe if I put the light up here. So there's a connector here, and then here's the business end of the antenna for the stereo, which routes into the center. You might be able to disconnect this instead of having to reach around to get at the back of the stereo for that. So you're going to have to figure that out on your own for your own installation, whether you have a stock stock stereo or not. So far, most of this stuff we don't touch, except for the glove box has to be removed, And now we're over here to the steering column and the instrument panel. Do we need to remove it? The answer is yes. The steering column, as you can see, which I think I pointed out in another video, we have this cross part of the skeleton of the dashboard, which is not removable, so that means that the dash column must be removed from the interior of the column, not the dash column, the steering column must be removed from the interior side of the car in order to get the dash off. Does the instrument panel need to be removed, or the instrument cluster? The answer is yes, it does. The instrument cluster connectors stay on the firewall side of the car, so you have to remove them. And again, over here we have on the far left, do you need to remove that speaker cover? The answer is no. There are also a bunch of screws that go along the bottom of the dash. Those simply keep the skin, if you will, of the dash in place. No, you do not have to remove them. And if I can tip this over without dropping it, there are a bunch of screws along the top of the dash. Do you have to remove them for the instrument cluster? Yes. For everything else, no. Now, while we've got this tipped forward, in order to remove the dash skeleton, if you will, and when I say the skeleton, I'm referring to the aluminum frame behind the plastic skin. On the top of the dash, you have a bolt here. I believe, is it a 13 or a 10? It's either, I think it's a 13. I'm not sure about that. I'll check. So we have a bolt here that we have to loosen. And as you can see, there's a little access place for socket wrench. Bolt here, that has to be loosened. Bolt here, I should say it has to be removed. And one here. And it's actually a nut. The bolt is fixed to the car, and you remove the nut in order to remove the dash. And then from there, continuing to speak about removing the dash stay, you have these 3 Torx bolts that you'll have to remove on the left side, and the same 3 Torx bolts that you have to remove on the right side, and then you lift up and tilt forward the dash to pull it out of the car. So it actually is not a daunting or super difficult job when you really think about it. It is, of course, fiddly. You do have to do a number of things to disconnect various elements of the wire harness, but overall, relative to some other types of cars where the dash may need to be removed, it's not super difficult. So that's it. I just wanted to give you those tips in terms of what you absolutely needed to remove versus what you might not need to remove to speed along your own journey in removing a Jeep TJ dashboard. So until the next update, see ya. Okay, this is the back side of the dashboard. And before I start putting things back together, we're going to continue to take things apart in as much as this is part of the vent system. I'm going to remove this, assuming that I can, and I am going to wash as best I can the insides of this ducting system, because I found that, you know, it's all got 22 years of accumulated dirt and grime and whatever. Although this doesn't look bad, I'm gonna take it apart and wash it anyway. So it's just kind of showing you what I'm up to. I still have this rat's nest to sort out, but be that as it may, that's what I'm going to do next. I'm going to take this ducting off and I'm going to wash it on the inside to get it as clean as possible, and that's it. Just wanted to show you that. See you. Okay, people, I'm just taking a pause here before I put the dash back in because we think we're ready to admire my handiwork. So I've got the vent on top of the airbox reinstalled. That was not a big deal, but do take note. See those screws that's holding on the vent? Those screws have those little lock tabs instead of nuts. Don't lose them. And I reused them. I took a hammer and I kind of flattened out the bent tongs. I don't know what to call them, and put them back on. And that vent is now secured. I also had to put some more of that cloth tape around some of the wire harness parts that secure the wire harness in place, because that black tape was so deteriorated. You can see a little bit there. Sorry if the light sucks, but it kind of crumbled in my hands, and I may redo that one too. And so we're very close here, and let me just show you the other side. There she is in all of her glory. That's the airbox installed. I do have to put a bolt here that was missing, or a screw rather. But again, this is the vent pipe, and that's all been cleaned inside and out. Put that back, and that's it. I think it's ready. I also want to talk a little bit about the other side of the firewall. Here's the lighting is a little bit better. I installed the blower. When you install the blower with the airbox in the car, you do have to remove the computer to install the blower, but it's not a big deal. It's 3 screws. I used a 5/16 socket on those 3 screws, and I also have the, let's see if I can get a bit more light down there. I have reinstalled that outer vent. I got my foam insulation, if you can see it up there, my high temperature foam insulation. I also took these heater pipes. I fastened them on this end, and then I took them off on the business end by the water pump, and I filled the heater core with coolant. In so doing, I discovered that the radiator is suspiciously low on coolant, and I'm going to have to investigate that a little bit further, because to me it's low enough to the point where, remove this windshield cleaner, where it I'm wondering out loud if I've got a blown head gasket. I don't drive this Jeep a lot. I work on it a lot, but I don't drive it a lot, at least not yet. And I do have ambition of changing out that 2.5 liter engine for a V8 at some point. And if the head gasket is indeed shot, and here I am installing air conditioning, that V8 may come sooner than later. Bank account's willing. So we'll see. More investigation. Since I bought the vehicle, I always thought that this radiator was newish or new. And so I don't think that there's a leak coming from the radiator. Don't know yet, though. Haven't investigated it. More to come on that, but I thought that that was an interesting development. As I mentioned in an earlier segment, for that vent against the firewall, there were two nuts holding that thing on, which kind of screwed me up because I didn't realize that the one nut was there. When I reinstalled it, I only used one nut on the outside of that plastic tang down there. I don't know how well you can see it. Where did my flashlight go? That there's only one nut now holding that onto the firewall. So there you have it, people. Just pausing to document my efforts here to install and hopefully be completely ready for the dash to go back on, and also hopefully it'll work. The airbox, that is, and the car will start and I can move on to trying to understand why the coolant was so low in the radiator. I used something between a half a gallon and 3/4 of a gallon to top it off. And even removing the old core does not explain all of that half gallon that's missing. So we'll see. Anyway, thought that I would just show you what it looks like with the dash still off and the airbox now fully and completely installed and ready to go. And we'll go from there. In the meantime, over here on the dash, which is obviously on the bench, I did do some checking on the stereo because the stereo is aftermarket. This is the stereo, and it came with the Jeep when I bought it. And only one speaker is working. I've tested the speakers in this dash. The speakers are good, or they, at least to my testing, they are, which leaves the stereo as being suspect. And if in fact it is the stereo, that's okay, because I will retrofit a double DIN system into the dash at some point in the future, sooner rather than later. And so that's it. So we're ready to put this all back together, and that's the next step. So I may pause again when I've got this thing on the car and secured. So until then, until the next problem, or until the next problem. See ya. Okay, quickie update. The dash is reinstalled. The nuts along the top are tightened. The 3 Torx bolts on either side are on and tightened, and the dash is secure, and I'm slowly reconnecting all of the wiring harnesses that can be reconnected. I messed up the, well, I wouldn't say I messed it up, it was the predecessor who messed it up. The speaker wires came apart, so I put some splicers, some connectors on there that were a little bit more secure. Just got done doing that. I've routed the wiring. I have no idea if this is going to come out in the light or not. We'll see. If not, I'll edit it out. But I pull the wiring through for my auxiliary lights, for the light bar, fog lights, and the center lights. And I'm gonna put the center dash back together next. Make sure that everything plugs in properly. And I've already, I don't know if you can see this, but I've got the wire harness connected for the blower box, so that's done. Back behind here is the wire connector for the airbag. That's reconnected, and I'm going along at a pace. And now that I'm feeling good about the dash being reinstalled, I will reinstall the center console and put that back together and keep going. So just wanted to update you guys. Everything's going good so far. No major problems. The dashboard went in. I did it by myself. I did not have a helper. Some other websites, not websites, YouTube channels have suggested that having a helper will be handy. Maybe so, but you know, I'm not Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I was able to manhandle the dashboard back into place without too much difficulty at all. So less than 5 minutes of fiddling and it was on the top bolts, and that's basically what you have to do. You have to lift it up and put it down on the top 4 bolts, and then it just kind of falls into place. There are 2 nuts in here. I don't know if you can see them, but those nuts reattached obviously, and onward and upward. So until the next update. Okay, quick update here. Got the instrument panel on, as you can see. I've got the new air conditioning controller blower installed. I've got the stereo reinstalled, and the next major task is to reinstall the steering wheel. I'm going to stop at this point. I've been working on putting this back together, slow, steady, methodical, but it has been time consuming, so I think I'm going to wait to put the steering on until I'm fresh and ready to tackle that project. Hopefully there won't be too many problems, but it could be a little fiddly, so we'll see. I did see while I was rerouting those wires for my auxiliary lighting that there's a better way to route them. So I think that I'll do that while I've still got things in pieces. So I will redo that also, but after the steering is in and I've got just about everything else done except for the steering and putting the covers back on and whatnot. And then we put the battery in and reconnect it and see if it runs, see if I get any errors. Anyway, I thought I would just update you before I knocked off for the night, and we will pick this back up tomorrow and reinstall the steering. See ya. Okay. The dashboard is completely reinstalled. There were no major issues. In case you don't recognize that, that's the power pole. Since I had the dash apart, I've added direct 12 volt auxiliary power for two-way radio. And the interior job is done. So this is a success. I also fixed some wiring issue with these auxiliary light switches. There's the fog light, there's the mid or spotlights, and the light bar control. And I added what I'll call a master relay, and I tied that master relay into the accessories so that power would go to the auxiliary lights only when the ignition switch was turned on, and that is to prevent accidental discharge of the battery, and also because these little LED, well, they're not LEDs, they're incandescent, but these little lights they get, if they're wired if they're wired directly to 12 volt without going through the ignition switch, they get a little bit of bleed voltage, so that these lights will remain on all the time. And in order to eliminate that, I wired in a master relay that is activated by the turning of the ignition key. So now these lights will only turn on when there is 12 volts flowing through the master relay. These two switches, the incandescent light is burned out. I will need to replace them because the light was on all the time. This one I replaced as an experiment to help me with getting the wiring situated. So this one is still working, so it's not urgent, but at some point I will replace these two switches so I have the indicator lights all working. And as far as wiring those switches through the accessories, I did that by tapping into the cigarette lighter jacket for the so-called control for the relay. So it's when the ignition switch is keyed on, only a small amount of voltage is being drawn off to activate the master relay, and then the master relay pumps 12 volts through from the battery to the individual relays. I have one relay set up for each switch, which is probably overkill, but that's the way that I did it. And I don't have many lights on the light bar at this point. I only have two. Eventually I'm going to fill the light bar with 4-inch round lights, probably KC lights. So this switch will be drawing, or the circuit behind this switch will be drawing a lot of amperage eventually. Spotlights probably won't change. Fog lights certainly won't change. So I've got two lights for fog lights, two lights for the mid spotlights, and then there'll be a number 6, 7, 8, something like that on the light bar. And all of this now is controlled by a master relay, which is working just fine. And so that's it. The interior work is done. Also, the work that I did to straighten out the wire harness for the stereo, reinvigorated, I guess. I don't know what the right word is. Repaired the issues that I was having with the speakers. So now all 4 speakers work. The stereo system doesn't have a lot of bass, which is probably a speaker issue more than a stereo issue. But it now does work, and all 4 stereo speakers work as well. So that was another added benefit to taking apart this dash and putting it back together. So now we are going to move to the other side of the firewall to get the air conditioning mechanicals installed so that we can then have the air conditioning system charged, and hopefully it will all work. That remains to be seen, but at least the interior side of the work is pretty much done at this point. So onward and upward, I guess. I will separate the inside the firewall from outside the firewall videos. So if there's anything noteworthy, I'll do a similar kind of video series and turn the camera on to talk about what I encounter with the engine side of the firewall issues. There are already a couple of issues that I would love to discuss so that you all are forewarned. The one thing with the interior that I'm probably going to revisit is that I believe that there is a backlight for the vent control, and it's not working. So this is backlit, but this is not. So I may delve into that at some point in the future, but I'll probably save that till after I have the complete air conditioning system running. So that's it for this session of this old Jeep, I guess. And we'll talk to each other again soon. Bye for now.